What's
Is there
that?
a delay? Can you guys?
No.
Is there a delay?
No, we hear you perfectly.
Okay.
You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to Soccer Day, a special holiday edition in most of the continent. Not where Kevin is, sorry, Kevin. But nonetheless, it is certainly President's Day in the United States. It's Family Day where I am. It's nothing in Kevin. It's Monday with Kevin. So with no further ado, though, I'm going to bring our guest on today, Kurt Larson from the Toronto Sun. Kurt, thanks for taking some time.
What's going on, guys?
Not much down in Florida right now with Toronto FC. Kurt, we're going to get to the Bill Manning interview stuff in a minute at the end of the interview, but I wanted to start obviously with the big news of the day. Toronto FC adding Victor Vasquez from, most recently Cruz Azul, but he was the Belgian Player of the Year previously to that. Ultimately, he started his career playing with Messi and the boys in the Barcelona youth system. What can you tell me about this player?
Well, they can play at TFC's excited about it. It was funny. I was walking around the lobby of the team's hotel today. Down here in Orlando, and I walked by a player that was sitting with some of the staff, and I kind of did a double take and wondered who it was. And then minutes later, they sent out the release confirming that they'd signed the player. So I went over there and got a picture of him and said hello. A lovely person, lovely gentleman. He seemed interested in who I was and what I had to say. But I talked to Greg Danny about him, and it's just exactly what you think. It's a player who they think can help provide more opportunities for Sebastian Giovinco and Josie Altidore. Maybe take a lot of the attention off Giovinco as a playmaker and let him do more in front of goal. He's also a player that Greg thinks that can maybe help them change shapes if they need to. Of course, they play in that 3-5-2, but Greg Danny told me that he thinks adding Victor Vasquez can really help them adjust to a diamond if they need be, and really have a player for the first time in a long time at the top of the diamond who's capable of creating things and pulling strings. So an interesting signing. I think it kind of took the league by surprise today, and people will be watching this player all season, I think.
Yeah, it's been a long time since TFC had a player like that. Maybe going all the way back to Armando Guevara when he was at the top of his game. So certainly an exciting day for TFC supporters. Where do you think he will fit specifically in that? And who of the players that is currently on the roster do you feel might be at risk for losing some of this player time? A lot of people today, from the Canadian side of things, we're worried about Sarah, we're worried about Chapman maybe getting frozen out because of this move.
Yeah, I think if they play in that 5-3-2 or the 3-5-2, if you want to call it, he probably plays in one of those roles in front of Michael Bradley, probably a little bit higher than Armando Cooper, who I see as more of a two-way player. Armando Cooper is probably more of a defensive-minded midfielder than he is an attacking midfielder. So, you could argue that, Jay Chapman's probably going to, take a seat or even maybe be left off the bench occasionally. But you also got to look at a guy like Jonathan Osorio. Does he also come up and TFC go with Michael Bradley, Vasquez, and Cooper in the midfield? That's probably the best setup for me if they're playing with three in there. But these are young players. Chapman's still young. I know Osorio's been in the league for a while now, but still relatively young for this league. So it's not a surprise. These things happen. They bring in players that have experience. They'll be in for 2-3 years, probably at most. And you just got to hope that a guy like Jay Chapman and even Osorio are in there soaking things up. It's interesting too. Just to add, Greg Vandy actually told me he thinks Sergio Camargo is a player that can learn a lot from Vasquez, and he says he's actually the closest guy to Vasquez in terms of similar qualities.
When you're looking at Vasquez, Kurt, is he the missing piece? So Toronto was missing maybe late in extra time and penalty shootout. Is he like the missing piece to finally go all the way maybe in 2017 for TFC?
I think so. I think you look at TFC's starting 11 right now, and it's basically a starting 11 that got them the MLS Cup and probably should have won MLS Cup regardless of not having that missing piece. And now you got a player of Vasquez's experience and quality, and just based on his pedigree and some of the tape you see, you have to think that this is a roster, at least in the Eastern Conference, that's capable of getting back to MLS Cup. So the missing piece, I asked Greg Denny that question a few hours ago, and he basically said that he hopes so. And I think TFC's been very meticulous with this signing. They've gone through a lot of names. They've checked references. They've balked at certain signings because of transfer fees, and they finally landed on this guy who they've been chasing for 3 years now. So it's interesting. He would have been a DP 2 years ago if TFC would have got him at the right price, but a club group was asking for a bit too much, so now they get him on a free transfer from Cruz Azul, and they're paying him significantly less, I think.
You sat down last week, Kurt, with Bill Manning, president of TFC. Talk about the CPL. We'll get to that in a minute. But TFC is closer to its supporters than it was a few years back. Success does help. But what can you tell us about Bill Manning and his philosophy towards getting the fan back behind the team?
I think Bill Manning he's a guy that wants to be inclusive. He's a guy who wants, I think, the fans to know they matter and they make a difference. Yeah, he had that little bit of a little dust up with them last year, but I think they solved that pretty quickly, and he sat down with supporters and hashed that out. But he's a guy who when he came in, he looked at the Toronto soccer community, guys like Bob Arucci, Dino Rossi, he mentioned. And a few other guys, and he said we need to bring everybody into the TFC family and make them feel welcome, and do what we can to extend these kind of olive branches and really make TFC feel like a community. I think he brings that from Real Salt Lake, where it's probably tighter knit, smaller city, and there's more. Maybe there's more of a connection in Salt Lake to the front office than there was in previous years at TFC. So. I would just say he's trying to be inclusive and trying to let people know they matter, and he wants to listen, and he seemed very open to taking ideas. As people might have read in the story I wrote, he actually went to a supporter's house and had dinner with him when he shortly after he arrived. So I thought that was pretty interesting and fantastic.
Right, let's move to the Canadian Premier League comments, which did, having myself talk to people in the soccer community here in Toronto after the fact, it did rub a few people the wrong way, at least how it came off in terms of sort of, in their opinion, taking the position of, if we can't be part of it, then we're going to take our ball and play by ourselves. That's kind of the phrasing that I was hearing that day. You being in that conversation, what do you feel TFC's position on the Canadian Premier League is?
Yeah, just to add context is interesting. Actually, what I was meeting with Bill for that night was just to kind of talk about his progression at TFC and what he was, thinking at the time after being here for roughly 2 seasons. And, we got to the end of the conversation, and I said, what's going on with the Canadian Premier League? And I always seem to ask guys that, towards the end of my interviews just to see if they have any information. And get a few things to say. I'm not surprised the piece I wrote rubbed people the wrong way. You could liken it to I don't know, maybe you're asking the girl out on a date and they keep putting it off and she won't give you an answer. I mean, maybe that's kind of what's going on here. But I only have one side of it. I reached out to CTL officials who just said they couldn't really comment right now. But TFC wants to be a part of it. They want to have a team in the league. They want to have TFC2 in the league. They're open to pretty much anything, rebranding if they have to. They're open to really just sorting anything out. They just want MLSE to be affiliated with the CPL for whatever reason, probably because they want to protect their interests. It's one of those things where people say that TFC, MLSE is under no threat from the CPL, which is going to be miniature in comparison to MLS. But at the same time, I guess you could say, if you're running a business, do you want 90% of the market share, or do you want 99% of the market share? I think TFC wants the entire market. I think it's just good business to be territorial, and They're interested in protecting what's theirs, whether that be potential players, young players, prospects, or anything else in the future. So it's interesting because he said that no matter what, they're going to be supportive of the league, but at the same time, he also kind of said that good luck if they try and come in here with a new Toronto team, right?
Kurt, I think it's fair to say of the journalistic voices that have talked about the Canadian Premier League in the last 6 months or 8 months or so, that you've been more skeptical of some. I'm curious to sort of hear what your position on the Canadian Premier League is and how you feel about whether it can be successful or not. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that more soccer is good soccer. I'm never going to be against more soccer in Canada or in the United States. I'm never going to be against more young players getting opportunities. I want the Canadian Premier League to succeed, whatever that means. Whether that means having a small league that you get crowds of 5,000 people and players are getting paid a living wage. That's great. That's what I want. But at the same time, people who know me know that I'm not going to speak flowery about a league or not give my opinion. And my opinion is it's going to be tough for the CPO to really take hold. Especially in Toronto, I don't see the player pool being one that sustains interest in a big market that already has a team. I don't see enough young Canadian players looking for jobs that people are going to be interested in watching. So, I've likened the CPL to being at maybe a USL level or even below that, and I'll stand by that. I think that's the truth. You got to start somewhere. So the CPL will start, and we'll see where it goes. But I just think it's going to be tough to gather interest when there's so many options and the marketplace is just so saturated. So it's a thing that comes down to talent pool and money, and how much money are people willing to put into this league to see it get going. Long story short, I want to see it win. I'm just not sure if it can based on all the variables.
We are in the middle of training camp. The season is only a few weeks away. During this off-season, Kurt, is there a team, a project in particular across MLS that really caught your attention?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I just missed that.
Is there a team in the offseason that really caught your attention by their move, training players, their draft, the way they're building their project as a team?
You have to look at the expansion teams. A team like Atlanta is bringing in all kinds of interesting players, and they have been now for a year. The thing with them is that you talk to executives around the league, and they wonder how easily it's going to come together for Atlanta when you're bringing in a lot of foreign talent and players who have never played in MLS. Are they going to be able to bring it together? And then you look at Minnesota, and you wonder kind of what they're doing. They have a lot of players they've kind of brought along from the NASL days. They've made a lot of signings that are kind of under the radar, so you have to wonder if they're even going to be able to compete. Aside from that, I think the Bosnian guy that signed out in Salt Lake, that's an interesting signing. There's been a lot of interesting players coming into the league. Jonathan Spector down here in Orlando, to see how he helped them. Now you got to look at TFC, formerly quiet throughout the preseason, and then all of a sudden they make arguably one of the more intriguing signings of the offseason, and people are putting them back in front to win MLS Cup or win the Supporters Shield. Another interesting season, I think, coming up, and it's going to be interesting to see who got the signings right and who got them wrong.
Since the last time we talked, there's a big topic in MLS, the expansion and the rules, and we have the bids in since January 31st. Which bid excites you, if any, out of the 12 that were submitted last month?
It's funny you actually bring that up, because I was actually talking to Greg Vanny today, and I said it'd be interesting if Hamilton got an MLS team, because I think that'd be fantastic for soccer in Canada. But obviously we know that's not going to happen. But I don't know. I think MLS should probably stay away from the Carolinas. You have to wonder by now if Miami's even in the conversation anymore. And then you really, for me, you got to look at which markets can get it done, which markets can get the right stadium in the right location and get it done. We all know all of these bids have big time money and $150 million expansion fees. So money is not really one of the talking points here. It's a matter of who's going to do it right and get the right stadium and the right environment. I think Nashville could be an interesting project. Detroit intrigues me just because of its location. And then you got to look at places like Sacramento because you could see a groundswell there where suddenly they become like a sporting KC and the park is always filled and there's interest locally and they're treated like a major league team. So like I said, Carolina, I'm not really sure about a place like Raleigh or anything like that, especially with what the NHL has done there. But probably Nashville and Detroit and maybe Sacramento. But I don't think any of the places would be, or most of the places wouldn't be a bad decision.
One of the themes that we've looked at for all of January is this idea of an MLS Cup hangover and how you overcome that. Certainly, we saw it last year with both Portland and Columbus having subpar seasons, missing the playoffs in both cases. Are you seeing anything in particular that the TFC is doing, being close to them right now to sort of address that idea that they might start flat to make sure that they start firing on all cylinders based on what you're seeing down there in training camp?
I don't think so. I think the thing about TFC is that it all seemed to come together so late in the season, right? I mean, don't forget that early in the season, some people wanted Greg Vanney fired after a reasonably slow start, and midway through the season, there were injury problems, and then Sebastian Jaminko gets hurt, and so it was kind of a strange season, and I don't think anybody was completely sold on TFC getting to an MLS Cup, and then it all seemed to kind of come together in the last month, and the fact that TFC continued playing into mid-December, I think they basically just picked up where they left off. And, the thing about Columbus and even Portland to a certain extent, though I like their roster, is that you could kind of poke holes in their lineups and say, well, what about this guy? And did this guy overperform last year? And then you look at their results, maybe they had a lot of one-goal games that could have gone either way. I think you look at TFC's roster right now, and you look at how they played at home last year, just really dominating teams, and even during the playoffs. Dominating New York City, dominating, Montreal, maybe out of the scoreboard, but they dominated that game and then dominated MLS Cup. I mean, this is a team that's capable of dominating teams at home. It's a roster that I think is among the best in MLS for sure. And I think they have, the best 2 or 3 DPs in the league, you could argue. So when you look at the roster, I don't think you can poke too many holes in it. I don't think it's really a pretend team like maybe Colorado was, or maybe in Columbus certainly was last year. So no hangover for me. I think it's going to be tough, obviously, starting with a few games on the road, but by mid-season and the end of next year, I think TFC is going to be fine.
Obviously, Dallas, and we'll wrap with this one, but obviously Dallas, defending Sports Shield champions, won the double down there last year. Looked very good still. LA's had an interesting offseason, and Atlanta's intriguing. I don't think they have the depth to compete, though. But to me, I can't get past the fact that based on the fact that they're in the Eastern Conference, based on the continuity of the roster, that maybe Toronto should be considered the Supporters Shield favorite right now. Am I out to lunch in that? Is this a team that should be considered the favorite to perhaps win that shield?
No, I mean, you're not out to lunch at all. I think, the only reason maybe TFC doesn't win the Supporters Shield last year is because of maybe a bad call here in the league, a bad call there, and then certainly a few injuries that kept their star players out for, many, many games. You look back at Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, and Sebastian Javinko, I think combined had 30-man games lost, which is exceptional when you consider the performances they still put in, and Josie how he ended the season, and Javinko, of course, an MVP candidate. Anyone who doesn't put TFC at the forefront of the conversation for Supporters Shield didn't watch much of last season and didn't realize that we didn't really see TFC at its best until November, December. So, I'd be lying if I said I keep close tabs on all the Western Conference teams. And I'm sure the media out there, and I'm sure the GMs out there think they can compete. But when you look at Toronto FC, like I said, especially with the addition of Victor Vasquez today, you have to look at that starting 11 and think that they can go into any game and win it.
All right, Kurt, we'll give you a chance before we say goodbye to let us know what's coming down the pipe with the Sun this week.
I don't know yet. It depends on who they'll let me talk to. I plan to sit down with with Michael Bradley for sure. I talked to him briefly stayed at a team hotel, just asking him how U.S. training camp was and whatnot. So we'll probably have a piece coming up with him soon, and I'll sit down with Sebastian Javinko and really, I'm just interested to see some preseason games, close up and in person. The Minnesota game intrigues me on Wednesday. Toronto he's planning to use that as as a training game, and that they'll play the starters for 45 minutes and the reserves for the second 45 minutes. So it's going to interest me to see if Vasquez gets time in that game, and we're just going to keep on providing news here, and hopefully giving you guys plenty of hot takes about the CPL, because I know you guys eat that up.
All right. Hopefully we'll have some actual CPL news to talk about very soon. I'm hearing mid-March, but I've heard lots of things, so I'm going to just stop talking about that. Kurt Larson, Toronto Sun. Thanks again, Kurt.
All right, bud. We'll see you.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Thanks again to Kurt for taking some time to join us. Look, a lot of people want me to hold his feet to the fire when it comes to the Canadian Premier League. He is entitled to his opinion, but I'm a little less skeptical, as people do know, about the CPL, and hopefully we do get a resolution which makes everyone happy. And I think, I don't doubt his sincerity when he says that he hopes the league succeeds. Everyone does, and I do understand fully, Kevin, how so many people have skepticism about it because there's not enough information. Like, I hear more than most people, so I'm allowed to have a more glowing opinion of it, but we'll see, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's still a project. Like, there's no formal announcement. When you put to it, nobody really put their money right where the mouth is so far. There's like agreement or potential or maybe this, maybe that, but as long as the first check is not signed and the first player or a first hire outside of maybe Paul Byrne and some other key infrastructures hire, until then, it's still a project. So it's that's why people are nervous. There's already supporters group across Canada, especially in the prairies and some potential in the Maritime. There's a lot of supporters group already existing in Hamilton, Barton Battalion, shout out. But there's a lot of them already existing, so it'll be interesting to see if they can gather enough momentum to get themselves a team.
Yeah, look, I think what's interesting, if you look at the reporting recently, and we'll move past it after this because we talked quite a bit about this last week. If you want to go back and listen, they're not talking about ifs anymore. They're talking about whens. And Bill Manning said that in the interview. The league was being spoken about as if it was happening 100%. There is no doubt anymore that they are going to launch. The question is when. 2018 is what we've been reporting all along. The original, if you go way back to my first report in 2014, was always either 2017 or 2018. Obviously, 2017 is not happening. 2018 remains the goal. I let that little tidbit about what timing I'm hearing slip out, but grain of salt, guys. I've heard stuff a couple times before that has fallen through, and that worries me more than I let on sometimes, because I keep telling everyone that listen to me, is like, at some point you got to say something. You got to get out in front of this, because I think you're losing some of the faith. But then I kind of go back and forth in that too, and realize that really it's just the bubble that's talking about this right now, right? And outside the bubble, once the bubble.
It's the bubble, Duane, but
go ahead.
Kurt Larson talked about it in his newspaper, and Duane, he's the most read soccer writer in Canada. Toronto Sun, the biggest newspaper you could say still living and thriving in Canada, one of the biggest, and full coverage of TFC and Canadian soccer by Kurt Larson, and he does address the CPL now, and that's just a big statement in itself, I believe, no matter what the opinion or whatever TFC's opinion that were portrayed last week. What's important is the talk is actually now in a medium, in a format that it's widespread, mainstream, accessible, and that does bring a certain timeline to it that it is going to, that's possible, but it's probable and it's very likely soon.
Yeah, and I gave you that. You can go back and listen to a few minutes ago and hear what I said there, because I'm not going to repeat it, because I don't want to get people's hopes up and have them dashed again when it comes to timing. But certainly I've heard soon. Let's move to the other big piece of news that we're kind of burying right now, and that's the Vasquez signing. It's unexpected to me. I was on a bus this morning just idly looking at my email, and it popped up, so I instantly got that, and it really is one of those signings that it came almost completely out of the blue. This guy, although we've heard of him before, and as Kurt said, they had some kind of rumblings back there. He's one of those names that have popped up there and had now and then, but hasn't really been one that we've had on the front and center. It hasn't been someone that's been front of mind, right? So when the signing happens today, particularly this early, because I anticipated fully that I did anticipate that they'd bring a TAM player in, but I did not anticipate that TAM player would be coming in for the full season, and that is a very intriguing prospect when you talk about TFC. And that last question I asked is legitimate. I am not, non-TFC fans out there that want to view this and want to view Toronto stuff in the most negative way possible. We'll try and spin that however they want, but I think if you objectively look at the MLS Cup finalists that probably should have won that MLS Cup final game, adding that player that they've been looking for forever, and they really only have kind of one glaring weakness on the team, and that is right back depth. And if your biggest glaring weakness is right back depth, you're probably pretty good heading into the season. I haven't come down with my full predictions yet, but they are in the conversation in my head, because yes, I have conversations in my head about possibly being my supporter shield pick, and that terrifies me, Kevin.
I'm just wondering, outside of soccer, what those conversations could be, but we're not going to go there. What's interesting to me with the Vasquez signing is TAM, and how important TAM and those tools that the general manager are given to make a good team fit under that cap. It's interesting what type of player he could bring, and I think Vasquez is one of the latest evidence of that beneficial, not top 3, but between 4 and 10 depth in your roster position gets better with those players signed that are usually made possible because of TAM money.
This is $1 million player. TFC has 4 DPs on the roster now. So if you have 4 of your 11 starters are DP quality, then that's dangerous, because not a lot of teams can do that in this league, and that is what's going to set the wealthy teams apart. LA can do the same thing. Atlanta has been doing the same thing, just as an expansion team. This is, when you add the continuity of what TFC has brought, a lot of these players are back for their 3rd, 4th season in a row now. That's something that's unique to this club. It's something that's so valuable in this league. You put in like the ability to have their kids sort of pop in here and there to add a break. And we talked about JH, and we talk about his area. We talk about even some of those guys that are on the peripheral that we're not really bring too much with another year experience under their belt, and they should be able to start these guys here and there to allow them to be able to be at the end of the season again. They're a dangerous team, and that doesn't mean that they won't slip up, because MLS is a fine margin league. The worst team is to the best team in any other league in the world, in my opinion. So this is not something that's a for sure, but certainly an intriguing prospect signed today. Not prospect, player signed today in Marquez. Kevin, just in terms of the player, and I mean, look, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I watched the Belgian league a lot, and
what?
I certainly know
that disappoints me, Duane. Come on, you're breaking the illusion. You have to say you watch every single game ever in the world of soccer, every single day of every single life.
Yeah, I wouldn't have much of a life, which some could argue I don't anyway. But nonetheless, Cruz Azul, his time in Cruz Azul was cut short basically by injuries. He had some trouble down there, just sort of settling based on his injury problems. But this is a player that just 2 years ago was the player of the year in Belgium. This is a player that when he was a teenager was considered in the same way that any other top Barcelona prospect would be. No, that's the kid ourselves. He got hurt and he had struggled a little bit early on, and he wasn't able to channel that early prospect possibility into anywhere close to the same level as his colleagues there, because he went through at the same time as Messi, so that's that's a high bar. But nonetheless, he's a player that had a lot of potential, had a lot of skill.
You can't judge Messi It's the other way around. Like, he's part of the norm. Messi is the extraordinary talent produced by that academy, right? And Evi Vasquez was one of the good ones in that academy at that time. Not Messi, not the greatest, but he was a good one in that academy in that setting. So there's that.
What I do know about this player in terms of his potential to be a game breaker in MLS is that the reaction from non-FC fans that were aware of this player was not like instinctive jealousy and dismissal. It was pretty much like, oh yeah, that's a good signing. And usually when the opposition, when the partisanship doesn't shine through and they're like, oh crap, that's pretty good, it's usually a good sign. Now that doesn't mean he won't struggle to settle and all those sort of things. We don't know, but there's qualities there that make this incredibly intriguing. In terms of where he fits, I think Kurt nailed it, and I do think it's probably Chapman that's going to struggle. Prior to this signing, a lot of TFC fans are really concerned about the fact that Chapman looked like, non-Canadian national team focused. TFC fans were concerned that Chapman might have to be thrown into a role that he wasn't quite ready for. This will give him an opportunity to learn and to sort of play another year, and that's going to frustrate national team fans. But in terms of a TFC only perspective, it's hard to argue against this move. It's hard to argue against bringing Cooper in, even though it pushed Will Johnson out. Again, from a TFC only perspective, I understand the national team stuff. I live that stuff all the time, and it disappoints me too that we don't have better opportunities for Canadian players. But that's what the Canadian Premier League is going to be for. And hopefully, in 5, 6, 7 years, those players will have, through the abilities that they have gained, through the professional environments that they have grown up in and spent their early career in, will be able to compete and push those players out for those positions, Kevin. And that ultimately is what will be best for Canadian soccer.
Yes, exactly. So we talked about Barcelona a bit, but there's a bit of news coming out of Barcelona in Spain, Duane. Neymar's final appeal has been rejected, and he's going to face the judge.
Fine and jail time.
Yeah, maybe fine and jail time. But the thing is, if it's underneath 2 years in Spain, those sentences, if it's a first offense, are rarely servable. That's why Leo Messi and his father are not in jail right now, by the way.
Yeah, well, yes, that's one reason why Messi and his father aren't in jail. But yes, it certainly is a precedent that's pretty consistent.
One of the reasons, yes.
Look, if you haven't read this story but following this story, it relates to his transfers from Santos back in the day. Basically, there was some underhanded stuff that was going around. It's all this stuff is about money. Ultimately, they were trying to arrange the.
I'm sorry to interrupt with the connection. I'm sorry, but like between you and me, we were following this case back then, like the signing of him, and we all knew he was going to Barcelona like 3-4 years even before it happened. Like it was almost a fraudulent way to sign a player way before and in front of everybody. It's like hidden in plain sight, basically. We all knew he was going to go to Barcelona years before it actually happened, right?
Yeah. And they probably did some tricky things, and it all relates to how the world worked. But it's the pre-corruption. We're in a post-corruption world in FIFA and world football now, right, Kevin? That's what we've been told. So this is something from the past, and we're going to move on from it.
Hopefully.
Nonetheless, bottom line on it, as Kevin said, he will likely, if he's found guilty of this, get a suspended jail sentence of under 2 years, which just means you have to stay out of trouble for the time duration of the sentence, and you won't have to spend any time. And I suspect that they'll make sure that he stays out of trouble, and a pretty significant fine will be involved as well. So there you go.
Yeah, well, what's the problem though? He's gonna pay what, 2, 3, 5 million fine. How much did he make since he's playing with Barcelona? It's probably the way it works. Like Messi had that, now it's gonna be Neymar. Probably like, guys, we're figuring out a way. Come play with us. And if we get caught, laws of our country are not going to be really severe with you for the punishment, and we'll figure out ways. You'll have a penalty, but with the amount of money would have paid you up until that point, that penalty will seem like just a slap on the wrist, and we'll be back to square one, and you'll be a player for us, and everything works out to be best for all parties. So that's kind of how it looks.
Yeah, well, it's kind of how it is. That's how the world works in many, many ways, Kevin. They just sort of factor that into their financial decision that they're making.
Thanks for destroying my thanks for destroying my innocence, Duane. Thanks.
Yes. Yes, I just destroyed Kevin's innocence. We apologize for that. All right, the connection issues we're having today makes it a little for us to have a back and forth. Plus, we do have to do a show pretty quick on a quick turnover tomorrow. So maybe we'll shelf the other stuff that we have there. But real quickly, anything jump out at you, Kevin, on the FA Cup weekend?
Oh, Sutton. Lincoln City, first of all. Lincoln won. And if Sutton would have won, Duane, it would have been a Sutton-Lincoln in quarterfinal, making sure that a non-league team would have been in the semifinal of the FA Cup. But that's a moot point because Arsenal got it done at Gander Green Lane, 2 goals, but it was quite interesting to see Sutton United go up for it, go against Arsenal, play on that pitch, seeing the 300-pound backup goalkeeper on the bench. Oh, it was awesome. Sutton United, I love you. Sutton United, I love you. You're not going to Wembley, but you did your best. 2-0 defeat at home, not too shabby for a non-league side coached by a stock market rich man from the city that literally sponsors the club, Paul Daswell, and is the manager because of that. What a great story. It's a long 7-game achievement in the FA Cup for a non-league side. And you know what? Lincoln City carries the torch of the non-league into the quarterfinals, and that is interesting.
Pretty significant accomplishment for a non-league team to get to the quarterfinals, and it will probably end there, although God only knows with Arsenal, but nonetheless that would be something that those fans and
they just
exactly
exactly.
All right, Kevin, let's call it a day. I'm going to say goodbye. I'll let you, as always, wrap the show up.
Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Soccer Today Live, hopefully with a better connection, and until then, have a good soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.